Whenever a tragedy happens, society moves quickly, sometimes within minutes, sometimes within hours, sometimes before all the facts are even known. People gather around televisions, they gather around social media, they gather around news articles, comment sections, podcasts, and conversations at work, and almost immediately the same process begins. What happened? Who did it? Who is responsible? Who should be punished? Those questions matter. In many cases, they matter enormously. Accountability matters, justice matters, truth matters. But there is another question that often receives far less attention, a question that can make people uncomfortable, a question that can sound suspicious simply because it is being asked. That question is, why? Not who, not what, not where. Why? Why did it happen? Why did the relationship reach this point? Why did the situation escalate? Why did the warning signs go unnoticed? Why did one person decide to do something they can never take back? And why are so many people uncomfortable even discussing those questions? The moment we ask why, people often become nervous. Some assume we are making excuses. Others assume we are blaming victims. Others assume we are attempting to remove responsibility from the person who committed the act. But understanding and excusing are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. A doctor studies disease without supporting disease. A firefighter studies fire without supporting fire. An investigator studies accidents without supporting accidents. Yet when it comes to human behavior, many people become uncomfortable the moment we move beyond condemnation and into understanding. Why? Perhaps because understanding requires complexity, and complexity is harder than judgment. Judgment is fast. Understanding is slow. Judgment requires certainty. Understanding requires curiosity. Judgment provides answers. Understanding often produces more questions. And human beings generally prefer answers over questions, especially when emotions are involved. Imagine a headline appears tomorrow. A husband kills his wife. A wife kills her husband. A boyfriend assaults his girlfriend. A girlfriend assaults her boyfriend. Within minutes, explanations begin appearing. He's crazy. She's crazy. He's possessive. She's toxic. He's insecure. She's manipulative. He's evil. She's evil. Case closed. The story is complete. Everyone can go home. But is it? Or have we simply attached labels to a situation we do not fully understand? Labels have value. Sometimes they accurately describe behavior. Sometimes they help identify patterns. Sometimes they help protect future victims. But labels can also create the illusion of understanding. Calling someone crazy is not an explanation. It is a description. Calling someone possessive is not an explanation. It is a description. Calling someone toxic is not an explanation. It is a description. Descriptions tell us what we are looking at. Explanations attempt to tell us how it got there, and those are very different things. Human beings are complicated, contradictory, emotional, sometimes irrational, sometimes logical, sometimes generous, sometimes selfish, sometimes all within the same hour. And because of that complexity, there is often more than one truth operating at the same time. A person can be responsible for violence. That is true. A person can also have experienced trauma. That can also be true. A victim can be undeserving of violence. That is true. A victim can also be imperfect. That can also be true. A relationship can contain manipulation. A relationship can contain love. A relationship can contain resentment. A relationship can contain dependency, all at the same time. Reality is often messy. Human beings prefer clean. We like stories with heroes and villains. Heroes make us comfortable. Villains make us comfortable. Heroes tell us who to support. Villains tell us who to condemn. Complexity asks us to sit with uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. Perhaps this is why so many conversations end before they truly begin. The moment someone asks, "Why did this happen?" someone else often responds, "It doesn't matter." But does it? This becomes especially important when discussing domestic violence. The public conversation often swings between extremes. One extreme attempts to excuse harmful behavior. The other extreme refuses to examine anything beyond the harmful act itself. Neither approach is particularly useful. One removes accountability. The other removes understanding. And both leave us with fewer answers than we need. The difficult reality is that not every person involved in a toxic relationship is a saint. Not every victim is perfect. Not every offender is a monster in the cartoon sense of the word. Human beings are more complicated than that. Acknowledging complexity does not justify violence. It never will. No amount of betrayal justifies murder. No amount of disrespect justifies assault. No amount of humiliation justifies abuse. Those lines remain exactly where they are, but acknowledging complexity does help us understand the environment in which destructive behaviors grow, and understanding environments is often more valuable than memorizing outcomes. Perhaps because the stakes feel personal. People fear that explanation will become justification. People fear that empathy will become excuse. People fear that understanding motives will somehow erase responsibility. But understanding and accountability can exist together. In fact, they often should. A judge may sentence someone. A psychologist may study them. Those are not contradictory actions. One addresses responsibility, the other addresses understanding. Society often excels at the first. It struggles with the second. Part of the problem may be that asking why sometimes leads us to uncomfortable places. It forces us to confront jealousy, humiliation, shame, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, need for control, need for validation, need for power, need for revenge. Emotions most people would rather believe they have conquered, but human beings are not as rational as we often imagine. Many terrible decisions begin with emotions that are completely ordinary: the desire to be loved, the fear of being left, the fear of embarrassment, the desire for respect, the desire for belonging, the desire for significance. These emotions are universal. What differs is how individuals respond to them. Some people seek healthy solutions, others seek unhealthy ones. Some seek therapy, others seek control. Some seek communication, others seek intimidation. Some seek growth, others seek blame. The emotional starting point may be similar. The decisions made afterward are where lives begin to diverge. This is why asking why matters, because the act itself is often the final chapter. The process began long before anyone noticed, long before the police arrived, long before the neighbors heard shouting, long before the headline appeared, long before the tragedy. By the time the public sees the explosion, the fuse may have been burning for years, and yet we spend most of our attention staring at the explosion. Very little attention is given to the fuse. Perhaps because the explosion is dramatic. The fuse is boring. The explosion fits into a headline. The fuse requires a conversation. The explosion creates outrage. The fuse creates reflection, and reflection demands patience. Maybe that is the real reason we don't ask why. Maybe it is not because we cannot ask. Maybe it is because asking why often reveals things we would rather not examine. It reveals complexity where we wanted certainty. It reveals humanity where we wanted monsters. It reveals uncomfortable truths about behavior, relationships, fear, power, and emotion. And sometimes it reveals pieces of ourselves. Because if we are honest, most people can identify moments when anger clouded judgment, when jealousy distorted perception, when pride prevented an apology, when fear influenced a decision. Most people have stood near the edge of emotions they did not fully understand, most simply never crossed the line. That realization can be unsettling because it reminds us that human behavior is not always separated by giant walls. Sometimes it is separated by choices, choices repeated over time, choices reinforced by habits, choices influenced by beliefs, choices influenced by circumstances, choices influenced by character. And understanding those choices may be one of the most important things we can do, not to excuse harm, not to justify violence, not to erase accountability, but to understand the pathways that lead people toward destruction before they arrive there. Because if our only response to tragedy is outrage, we may feel better, but we may learn very little. And if we learn very little, we may continue asking the same questions after the next tragedy, and the next one, and the one after that. Perhaps the better approach is to ask the question many people avoid. Not because it is comfortable, not because it is popular, but because it may be necessary. Why? Not to defend, not to excuse, not to blame, but to understand. Because understanding is where prevention begins.